Hello, my name is Benjamin. I want to share with you my journey of learning English. It wasn't always easy, but it was a journey that changed my life in many ways. I grew up in a place where English was not the main language, so I never had the chance to learn it when I was younger. As I got older, I began to realize how important English is. Everywhere I looked, I saw English, on the internet, in movies, and even at work. I started to think, if I could learn English, I could understand so much more. It felt like there was a whole world out there that I couldn't reach because of the language barrier. But it wasn't just about understanding more or being able to watch movies without subtitles. I had bigger dreams. I wanted to travel, to see new places, and meet new people. I knew that English would be the key to unlocking those opportunities. I also wanted to improve my career. I noticed that many of the best jobs required English. I thought, if I could speak English, I could apply for these jobs and maybe even get a promotion. It wasn't just about the money, though that was important too. It was about being able to communicate with more people, to share ideas, and to learn from others. So, I made a decision. I decided that I was going to learn English. I didn't know how long it would take or how hard it would be, but I knew that if I wanted to achieve my goals, I had to start somewhere. I told myself, Benjamin, you can do this. It's going to be a challenge, but it's a challenge worth taking. And so, my journey to learn English began. I was excited but also nervous. I didn't know where to start, but I was determined. I wanted to open up new possibilities for myself, to be able to communicate with people from all over the world, and to be a part of something bigger than myself. I knew that learning English would be the key to making these dreams come true, and with that thought in mind, I took my first steps on the path to learning English, ready to face whatever challenges might come my way. When I first started learning English, it felt like stepping into a completely new world, one that was both fascinating and overwhelming at the same time. I remember the excitement I felt when I decided to take this journey, but I quickly realized that it wasn't going to be easy. In fact, it was much harder than I had anticipated. My initial struggles were many, and they started almost immediately. The first challenge I faced was the alphabet. Even though I could recognize the letters, putting them together to form words was a different story. The pronunciation of each letter in English was different from my native language, and this made it difficult to sound out even the simplest words. I would often mispronounce words, which made me feel frustrated. For example, words like thought, through, and though looked so similar, yet they sounded so different. I struggled to understand why they were pronounced the way they were. Listening to English was another big challenge. I would listen to people speak in English, and it felt like they were talking too fast. The words seemed to blend together, making it hard to catch individual words or understand the meaning. I remember trying to watch an English movie without subtitles, and I barely understood anything. The accents, the speed of speech, and the slang were all new to me. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where half of the pieces were missing. Reading in English was no easier. When I picked up an English book or tried to read an article online, I found myself getting lost in the words. Many words were unfamiliar, and I had to look them up in a dictionary just to understand a single sentence. It was discouraging to spend so much time on just a few lines of text, and it made me doubt whether I could ever become fluent. I remember feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of words I didn't know and wondering how I could ever learn them all. Writing in English was perhaps the most challenging of all. When I tried to write simple sentences, I often made mistakes with grammar and spelling. The rules of English grammar were confusing to me. I would mix up tenses, use the wrong prepositions, or place words in the wrong order. For example, I struggled with the difference between I have gone and I went. The more I tried to write, the more I realized how much I didn't know. It felt like I was constantly hitting a wall. There were moments when I felt like giving up. The more I struggled, the more I questioned whether I could really learn this language. I would sit with my books or in front of the computer, feeling frustrated and defeated. The progress was slow, and the challenges seemed endless. I often thought about how much easier it would be to just quit and stick to my native language. But despite these struggles, something inside me wouldn't let me give up. I knew that learning English was important for my future, and I didn't want to let these challenges stop me from achieving my goals. I realized that if I wanted to succeed, I needed to change my approach. I couldn't just sit back and hope that the language would come to me. I had to actively seek out opportunities to learn and practice. So, I decided to take the first real step in my English learning journey. I enrolled in an English language class. This was a big decision for me because it meant committing time and effort to something that was difficult. But I knew that I needed guidance, structure, and support if I was going to make progress. In the class, I met others who were also learning English, and this made me feel less alone. We were all facing the same challenges, and it was comforting to know that I wasn't the only one struggling. In addition to the classes, I also began practicing on my own. I started by listening to English music and podcasts, even if I couldn't understand everything at first. I would replay the songs or podcasts over and over, trying to pick out familiar words or phrases. I also began watching English movies with subtitles so I could see the words as they were spoken. This helped me start to connect the sounds of English with the written language. I also made a commitment to read more in English. I started with simple books and articles, using a dictionary to look up words I didn't know. At first, it was slow going, but gradually, I started to recognize more words and understand more of what I was reading. Writing was still difficult, but I practiced by keeping a journal in English. I would write about my day, my thoughts, and my experiences, even if it was just a few sentences. Over time, this practice helped me become more comfortable with English grammar and sentence structure. The more I practiced, the more I started to see small improvements. I could understand more when listening. I recognized more words when reading, and my writing became a little clearer. These small victories kept me motivated and encouraged me to keep going, even when it was tough. Taking that first step to seriously commit to learning English was the turning point in my journey. It wasn't easy, and there were still many challenges ahead, but I knew that I was on the right path. With each step I took, I was getting closer to my goal of becoming fluent in English. The journey was long, but with determination and persistence, I knew I could make it. As I continued my journey to learn English, I knew that I needed a solid plan and effective methods to make real progress. After struggling on my own for a while, I decided it was time to get some help. I realized that if I wanted to learn English properly, I needed structure and guidance, so I joined an English class. Joining the English class was one of the best decisions I made. At first, I was a bit nervous about going to the class. I worried that I would be behind everyone else or that I wouldn't be able to keep up. But as soon as I stepped into the classroom, I felt a sense of relief. The teacher was kind and patient, and the other students were friendly and supportive. We were all there for the same reason: to learn English. The class started with the basics, which was exactly what I needed. We began by learning the alphabet, pronunciation, and simple vocabulary. Even though I had tried to learn these things on my own before, having a teacher explain them in a clear and structured way made a huge difference. The teacher broke down each lesson into small, manageable parts, which made it easier to understand and remember. In the class, we practiced speaking, listening, reading, and writing every day. We would repeat words and phrases out loud, listen to short conversations, read simple texts, and write sentences. The repetition and practice helped reinforce what we were learning. It was also helpful to be in a classroom environment where I could ask questions and get immediate feedback. If I made a mistake, the teacher would gently correct me and explain why, which helped me learn faster. One of the most valuable aspects of the class was the group activities. We often worked in pairs or small groups to practice speaking and listening. This gave me the opportunity to use English in real conversations, even if they were simple at first. We would ask each other questions, share our thoughts, and discuss topics that were relevant to our lives. These conversations helped me gain confidence in speaking English and made me realize that I could actually communicate in the language. As the weeks went by, I noticed that I was improving. Words and phrases that once seemed difficult were starting to come more naturally to me. I was beginning to understand more when listening to the teacher or my classmates, and my reading and writing skills were getting better too. The class gave me a strong foundation in English and made me feel more confident in my ability to learn the language. While the classes were incredibly helpful, I knew that learning a language required more than just attending lessons a few times a week. I needed to practice English as much as possible outside of the classroom. So, I made a conscious effort to incorporate English into my daily life. One of the first things I did was to start speaking English with my friends. I was fortunate to have a few friends who were also learning English, so we decided to practice together. We would meet up after class or on weekends and have conversations in English. At first, it was a bit awkward, and we made a lot of mistakes, but we encouraged each other and kept going. We would talk about simple things, like our day, our hobbies, or our plans for the weekend. These conversations were a great way to reinforce what we had learned in class and to become more comfortable using English in a natural setting. In addition to speaking with friends, I also started watching English movies. This was both a fun and effective way to improve my listening skills. At first, I watched movies with subtitles in my native language, but as I became more confident, I switched to English subtitles. This helped me connect the spoken words with their written form and improved my understanding of pronunciation and vocabulary. I chose movies that were easy to follow, with simple plots and clear dialogue. I would watch them multiple times, picking up new words and phrases each time. Gradually, I found that I could understand more and more of what the characters were saying without relying on the subtitles. Another practice method I used was listening to English music. I found that listening to songs in English helped me improve my listening skills in a different way. The rhythm and melody of the music made the language feel more natural and easier to remember. I would look up the lyrics to my favorite songs and sing along, which was not only fun but also great for practicing pronunciation. Music became a part of my daily routine, and it helped make learning English feel less like a chore and more like an enjoyable activity. I also practiced reading and writing every day. I started with simple texts, like children's books, short stories, and articles written for English learners. Reading helped me see how words were used in context and improved my vocabulary. When I came across a word I didn't know, I would write it down and look it up in a dictionary. I kept a notebook where I recorded new words and phrases, along with their meanings and example sentences. This notebook became a valuable resource that I could refer back to whenever I needed. Writing was another key part of my practice routine. I began by keeping a daily journal in English. At first, I wrote simple sentences about my day, my thoughts, and my feelings. It was difficult at first, and I often had to look up words or grammar rules, but over time, my writing improved. I started to experiment with longer sentences and more complex ideas. Writing regularly helped me become more familiar with English grammar and sentence structure, and it gave me a sense of accomplishment as I saw my progress on the page. To make sure I was practicing consistently, I decided to make English a part of my daily routine. I realized that learning a language isn't something you can do just once in a while. It requires regular, dedicated practice. So I created a schedule that included time for English every day. Each morning, I would start my day by reviewing the notes and vocabulary I had learned in class. This helped reinforce the material and set a positive tone for the rest of the day. I found that revisiting what I had learned the day before helped me retain the information better and made it easier to build on that knowledge in the future. Throughout the day, I looked for opportunities to use English. Whether it was reading an article online, listening to an English podcast on my way to work, or chatting with friends in English, I made a conscious effort to immerse myself in the language. I also set aside time each evening to watch an English movie or show, practice my writing, or study new vocabulary. I made sure to keep it fun and varied so that I wouldn't get bored or overwhelmed. In addition to my personal practice, I continued attending the English classes regularly. The combination of structured lessons and daily practice helped me make steady progress. I began to notice that English was becoming a natural part of my life, not just something I was trying to learn. The more I practiced, the more confident I became in my ability to communicate in English. By making English a part of my daily routine, I was able to build strong language skills over time. It wasn't always easy, and there were days when I felt tired or discouraged, but I kept going because I knew that each day of practice brought me closer to my goal. I learned that consistency and perseverance are key to mastering a new language, and I was determined to see my journey through to the end. As I continued on this path, I found that my English skills were improving more and more each day. The small steps I took attending classes, practicing with friends, watching movies, and making English a part of my daily life were adding up to big changes. I was no longer just learning English. I was living it, and that made all the difference. Learning English was not an easy journey for me, Benjamin. While I was making progress with my classes, practice, and daily routine, I soon realized that there were many challenges along the way. These difficulties sometimes made me doubt myself and question whether I could really master this language. However, I knew that overcoming these obstacles was a necessary part of the process, and I was determined to push through. One of the biggest challenges I faced was understanding English grammar. English grammar is complex and full of rules that can be difficult to grasp, especially for someone who is just starting to learn the language. There were times when I would get confused by the different tenses, the use of prepositions, or the structure of sentences. For example, figuring out when to use has versus have or was versus were often left me scratching my head. I also found it challenging to understand the concept of articles like a, an, and the, which seemed so different from how things worked in my native language. These grammatical rules were not always easy to remember, and I often made mistakes. In the beginning, I would sometimes feel frustrated when I couldn't get the rules right, no matter how hard I tried. It was like trying to put together a puzzle where the pieces didn't always seem to fit. This frustration was compounded by the fact that English has many exceptions to its rules. What worked in one sentence didn't always work in another. This made the learning process even more confusing. Pronunciation was another significant challenge for me. English has many sounds that don't exist in my native language, and mastering them was difficult. For example, the thea sound in words like think or this was particularly tricky. At first, I would either avoid saying these words altogether or substitute them with something else. But I knew that avoiding the problem wouldn't help me improve. I practiced over and over, trying to get my tongue to form the sounds correctly, but it was hard to break old habits and adopt new ones. Understanding spoken English was also a major hurdle. When listening to native speakers, I often found that they spoke too quickly for me to follow. They used idioms, slang, and expressions that I wasn't familiar with, which made it even harder to understand what they were saying. I would watch English movies or listen to English music, but I often had to pause and replay the same sections multiple times just to catch what was being said. It was frustrating because I wanted to be able to understand and communicate fluently, but I felt like I was always one step behind. Despite these challenges, I knew that I couldn't give up. I reminded myself that learning a new language is a gradual process and that everyone struggles at some point. I wasn't alone in facing these difficulties. Every language learner goes through the same experience. It was important for me to stay patient and to keep working on the areas where I was struggling. Staying motivated was essential to overcoming these challenges. There were days when I felt like I wasn't making any progress, or when the challenges seemed too big to overcome. On those days, it would have been easy to give up, but I knew that if I wanted to succeed, I had to keep going. One of the ways I stayed motivated was by setting small, achievable goals for myself. Instead of focusing on the end goal of becoming fluent, which felt overwhelming, I broke the journey down into smaller steps. For example, I set a goal to master one new grammar rule each week, or to learn the pronunciation of a specific set of words. These smaller goals were much more manageable, and each time I achieved one, it gave me a sense of accomplishment. I celebrated these small victories because they were signs that I was making progress, even if it was slow. Another source of motivation was the support I received from my classmates, friends, and teacher. In the English class, I wasn't alone in my struggles. Many of my classmates faced similar challenges. We encouraged each other and shared tips on how to improve. My teacher was also a great source of motivation. Whenever I was feeling discouraged, she would remind me of how far I had come since I first started. She would point out the progress I had made, no matter how small, and this helped me see that I was on the right track. To keep my motivation high, I also focused on the reasons why I wanted to learn English in the first place. I reminded myself that learning English would open up many opportunities for me, both personally and professionally. It would allow me to communicate with people from different cultures, travel more easily, and access a wealth of information and knowledge that is available in English. These benefits were worth the effort, and thinking about them helped me stay committed to my learning journey. I also found inspiration in other people's success stories. I would read about or listen to stories of people who had learned English as a second language and had gone on to achieve great things. Their stories showed me that it was possible to overcome the challenges and become proficient in English, even if it took time and effort. These success stories served as a reminder that the difficulties I was facing were temporary and that with perseverance, I could reach my goals too. Finally, I made sure to take breaks and not be too hard on myself. Learning a language can be intense, and it's important to give yourself time to rest and recharge. When I felt overwhelmed, I would take a break from studying and do something enjoyable, like going for a walk, listening to music, or spending time with friends. These breaks helped me come back to my studies with a fresh perspective and renewed energy. Over time, I began to see the fruits of my efforts. The grammar that once seemed confusing started to make more sense. My pronunciation improved, and I could understand more when listening to English. The challenges were still there, but they became less daunting as I continued to practice and learn. I realized that the key to overcoming challenges is not to avoid them, but to face them head-on with determination and a positive attitude. By staying motivated and persevering through the difficulties, I was able to keep moving forward on my English learning journey. The challenges were a necessary part of the process, and overcoming them made me stronger and more confident in my abilities. I learned that with the right mindset, there's no obstacle too big to overcome. After months of hard work, dedication, and overcoming numerous challenges, I, Benjamin, began to notice a significant change in my English proficiency. My journey had been long, filled with ups and downs, but each step brought me closer to my goal of becoming fluent in English. Fluency didn't come overnight. It was a gradual process. At first, I noticed small improvements, like being able to hold basic conversations without constantly searching for words or getting stuck on grammar. Slowly but surely, my vocabulary expanded. I began to understand more complex sentences and could follow conversations more easily. Watching English movies, which once required subtitles and frequent pauses, became more enjoyable as I could comprehend the dialogues without much effort. I also became more confident in speaking English. Early on, I was hesitant to speak because I feared making mistakes or being misunderstood. However, as I practiced more, both in class and with friends, I started to speak more naturally. My pronunciation improved, and I was able to express my thoughts more clearly and accurately. It was a wonderful feeling to see how far I had come from those early days of struggling with the basics. One of the biggest milestones was the day I realized I could think in English without having to translate everything in my head from my native language. This was a true sign of fluency. It meant that I had internalized the language to the point where it became a natural part of my thought process. Conversations flowed more smoothly, and I could respond more quickly. The nervousness that once gripped me every time I had to speak in English gradually faded away. Writing in English also became easier. At first, even composing simple sentences was a challenge, but over time, I began to write longer and more complex pieces with confidence. Whether it was writing emails, filling out forms, or even jotting down my thoughts in a journal, I found that I could express myself in English just as well as I could in my native language. My grammar, while not perfect, improved significantly, and I felt proud of the progress I had made. Fluency was not just about speaking and writing. It was about understanding the culture and nuances of the language as well. I started to pick up on idiomatic expressions, slang, and cultural references that are common in English. This deepened my understanding of the language and allowed me to connect more with native speakers. I felt like I was not just learning a language, but also becoming part of a global community of English speakers. With my newfound fluency, a world of opportunities opened up to me. One of the first areas where I noticed a change was in my professional life. My improved English skills made me more competitive in the job market. I was able to apply for positions that required English proficiency, and during interviews, I was confident in my ability to communicate effectively. This led to new job opportunities that I wouldn't have been able to pursue before. In my workplace, I was able to take on more responsibilities that involved communicating with English-speaking clients or colleagues. My ability to converse in English allowed me to participate in meetings, contribute to discussions, and collaborate on projects with international teams. These opportunities not only enhanced my career, but also broadened my professional network. I was able to build relationships with people from different parts of the world, which enriched my work experience and opened doors to further growth. Outside of work, my English skills also gave me the confidence to travel to English-speaking countries. I had always dreamed of visiting places like the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, but the language barrier had held me back. Now, with my improved English, I could travel without fear of getting lost or misunderstood. I could navigate airports, hotels, and restaurants with ease, and I enjoyed exploring new cultures and making connections with people I met along the way. Traveling became a much more enriching experience, and I was able to create memories that I will cherish forever. Another opportunity that came my way was the ability to continue my education. With my fluency in English, I was able to enroll in online courses and programs offered by universities and institutions around the world. I took courses in subjects that interested me and were relevant to my career, which helped me gain new skills and knowledge. Learning in English allowed me to access a vast amount of resources, including books, research papers, and educational videos that were previously out of reach. This opened up a new world of learning possibilities and helped me continue growing both personally and professionally. Perhaps the most rewarding opportunity was the ability to connect with people from different cultures. I joined online communities and social media groups where I could engage with English speakers from around the world. These interactions helped me broaden my perspectives and learn about different cultures and ways of life. I made friends from various countries, and we would exchange ideas, share experiences, and support each other in our language learning journeys. These connections enriched my life in ways I hadn't anticipated and made me feel like a global citizen. Looking back on my journey, I realize how far I've come since I first decided to learn English. It wasn't an easy path, and there were many challenges along the way, but each step brought me closer to my goal. Today, I'm proud of what I've achieved, and I'm grateful for the opportunities that learning English has opened up for me. To anyone who is just starting their English learning journey, I want to encourage you to keep going, no matter how difficult it may seem at times. Learning a new language is a process, and it's important to be patient with yourself. There will be challenges and moments of doubt, but remember that every step you take brings you closer to your goal. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. They are a natural part of learning. The more you practice, the more confident you will become, and before you know it, you'll be able to communicate fluently in English. It's also important to stay motivated and to find joy in the process. Set small, achievable goals, celebrate your progress, and remember why you started learning English in the first place. Whether it's for personal growth, career advancement, or the ability to connect with others, keep that motivation in mind and let it drive you forward. Surround yourself with supportive people who can encourage you and share in your successes. And most importantly, believe in yourself. You have the ability to learn English, and with persistence and practice, you will achieve your goals. In conclusion, my journey to learning English has taught me valuable lessons about persistence, patience, and the power of practice. It has shown me that with determination and hard work, anything is possible. The challenges I faced along the way were stepping stones to success, and overcoming them has made me stronger and more confident in my abilities.